Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I have two questions. First, on the danuglipron dose optimization data, it's apparently still on track for the first quarter of this year. What is the range of possible outcomes, and is dropping this version of the compound a possibility, and what would be the next step? Second question is Chris Boshoff. I assume he's on the line. Under the heading of Nothing's Perfect, can you share with us two or three things in the Pfizer R&D portfolio or system that you think need to be fixed? New leaders usually say they want to move quicker, but sometimes they also thoroughly go through the portfolio and shed many projects. Is that also a possibility? Thank you.
Chris?
Should we start with Danu? So for Danu, just to be clear, we, as we stated previously, we now targeting first quarter to have data from the ongoing dose optimization and formulation study, the PK study, and we're on track to deliver that in Q1. And we haven't seen the data yet, but obviously that data will then determine decisions for the future of danuglipron. On your second question, as we've recently announced, we already focused our portfolio further. We've now established 4 end-to-end therapeutic areas: oncology, vaccines, internal medicine, and I&I. And part of that will be to focus on those opportunities that could provide the biggest value, both for patients, but also for Pfizer. So you will see during the coming months how we further focus and execute and accelerate those medicines we believe could be potential future blockbusters.
Thank you, Chris. And Steve, you're right that usually new leaders are taking their time to assess. But the good news with Chris is that he knew really the Pfizer organization, and I'm very impressed with the speed and thoughtfulness that he's deploying his changes. Already he announced the new organization, so selected a lot of leaders and refocused our pipeline in collaboration with Andrew Baum. So next question, please.
We'll go next to Jeff Meacham with Citibank. Please go ahead.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for the question. Just had a couple of quick ones. So for the COVID franchise, you guys talked about stabilizing revenue for this year. Maybe just give us some level of conviction and your level of investments in this business kind of going forward. I think most investors kind of would like for it to kind of be viewed as just maybe upside to the story. And then from a capital allocation perspective, when you guys think about the appetite for potential BD as you reprioritize or look at the pipeline and evaluate a lot of the assets in, say, early to mid development, just want to get a sense from you guys for the appetite for growing out the number of TAs, if you had more optimization to do that can be achieved through BD. Thank you very much.
Amin.
So Jeff, on COVID, maybe I'll start with Paxlovid. You saw Albert describe, we have multiple years now of reference where Paxlovid utilization tracks directly to the level of disease outbreak. And the year 2024 was no different. So we know that to be the case. And we've also put in place a very effective commercial model in Paxlovid that allows us to deliver on that and continue to improve. In fact, if you look at 2024, we had higher physician treatment rates than 23, and we also had gains in market share versus 23. So we know we have a model that works. And with regards to resource allocation, we have targeted our resource modeling for Paxlovid so that we are investing the places where it's relevant when it's relevant. So we have a very, very tailored model. And I think you see that in the results. We had a very big summer and early fall wave of COVID in 24. And then we had a milder and shorter winter wave. And you see that reflected in Paxlovid utilization. And we've also ensured that we have the right pricing model in place and put in place a new agreement with the US government on our Paxlovid contract that defines the eligibility for the USG PAC going forward. So there's clarity on that for January, February, and going into March. And as with regards to vaccinations on Comirnaty, again, we saw a pattern in 24 that very closely mirrored 23. So vaccination rates were quite stable. Again, here we also saw an improvement in our market share position for Comirnaty. And we are confident that our commercial execution, both with regards to the retail setting and the non-retail setting, will continue to put us in good stead as we move forward.
Thank you. And of course, in international, to save time here, we have contracts with our multi-year contracts that they are covering not only this year, but the year after. So all of that makes us feel that this is a very stable and predictable revenue stream. Why don't we go to capital allocation, and then Dave, maybe also Andrew, you can comment on the BD.
So just, Albert, I'll be real quick. From a capital allocation perspective, I'm very pleased with the company's cash flow generation throughout 2024 as we've continued to enhance our cash flow yield, number one. Number two, continue to aggressively delever. And now as we enter 2025, we'll be in a position from a cash and a delevering perspective to have a more balanced capital allocation strategy, allowing us to do slightly bigger business development programs if so desired in 2025. And with that, maybe I'll pass it over to Andrew to give some context around how we're thinking about that.
Yeah, so to recap what Chris says, we've narrowed our current therapeutic areas to the four, so oncology, vaccines, I&I, and internal medicine. Now, it's fair to say that those are fairly broad areas. They're big buckets that you can put lots of therapeutic indications in. If we were to explore adjacencies or indeed therapeutic areas where historically Pfizer hasn't been active, I think firstly, we'll be looking for truly breakthrough science that's tractable with a drug. Second, an unmet medical need that we feel that can be monetized. And thirdly, and most importantly, we have to have the talent with it in order to develop those assets if we go into a therapeutic area that is one that is unfamiliar to us or we don't have historically that backbone of talent.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Dave. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Chris Schott with JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much. Just two questions for me. Just coming back to capital deployment. Dave, just to build on those comments, you talked about slightly larger BD transactions. Can you just help size the range of what Pfizer is able to look at from here and how you think about balancing business development versus share repo, which I think you talked about as you started to delever would be part of the story. The second is on the RSV market. Can you just talk a little bit about the thinking and the size of the opportunity from here and the potential for growth given some of the 2024 results, both the U.S. as well as globally? Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, so as far as capital deployment goes, Chris, I think the good news is the company has a very robust cash flow generation capabilities. And over time, we'll be able to do both dividends as well as BD, as well as value-enhancing share repurchases. Specifically, as we come into 2025, given the strength of the company from a cash flow perspective, we have the capacity in the $10 to $15 billion zip code from a business development perspective within 2025 if we chose to focus in that area.
Thank you. Amir and Alexander on the RSV.
So very quickly in the U.S., firstly, the market did decrease in 2024, and that's something that we have been signaling for quite some time. This was because of shifts in ACIP as well as the early adopters of the vaccine in 2023. The important thing for us, the things that we can control, the strength of our commercial execution led us to the leading market share of doses shipped to end customers at 50% for 2024. And an improvement in the shots in arms market share by 18 percentage points versus last year. And our maternal indication also performed very well, tripling the uptake from last season. Now, as we look forward, in the absence of any major policy or ACIP change in 25, the RSV market without that is likely not to grow, but there are a lot of catalysts for midterm growth. One is any policy updates to year-round vaccination. Second, age expansion for 18 to 59-year-olds that are at risk where we have great data, as well as potential revaccination recommendations as data becomes more available. So those are midterm growth catalysts. And in the meantime, we remain confident in our ability to execute as that evolves.
So on the international front, Chris, what we see in this quarter is the beginning of the financial impact of the work we've done in approving, in getting through the VTC and the payers for Abrysvo. And in the countries where we received positive ETC and got reimbursement, we start to see great execution working hand in hand with the authority and HCP. Let me give you 2 examples in maternal immunization. So in the UK, after winning the exclusive tender, healthcare professionals vaccinated with Abrysvo over 60% of the eligible pregnant women in just 1 quarter in Q4. In France, in a competitive setting, Abrysvo was administered to over 40% of the eligible pregnant women in Q4 alone. So clearly, we see a potential as we move into 2025 in the MI, a great opportunity to expand usage and to expand vaccination. And of course, that is not just in the developed market, but also in emerging market. And for instance, as you know, Abrysvo was listed at the Pan American Health Organization. And so starting this year, we can have Latin American country to start contracting Abrysvo. Now, in the OA, we start also to see some traction. And the vaccination campaign in the UK already reached 44% of the eligible population. And regional vaccination was granted late 2024 in about half of the German population. And we're expecting to get the full German population access in Q1 2025. So again, on both maternal immunization and older adults, plenty of opportunity to grow.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Vamil Divan with Guggenheim Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks for taking my question. So maybe a couple I could on the pipeline. So Prevnar, the 25-valent, you mentioned starting phase 3 in adults this year. Just curious if you can comment on what you've seen so far. It gives you comfort in moving that forward when we might see the data publicly, and also any updates on the pediatric population and when you where things stand there. And then the second one's on punzicromab, and just you have the obviously cancer cachexia, which you're starting phase 3. We also noticed in the phase 2 heart failure program, you increased the patient enrollment significantly there. Just curious if you can provide any perspective on what drove that change and just maybe your broader views on the heart failure opportunity for that product. Thanks.
Yeah, Chris?
So first for PCV25, as Albert mentioned, this is an ongoing phase 2 study with a potential best-in-class vaccine. The phase 2 study is ongoing in both adults and in pediatrics. As we've mentioned earlier, serotype 3 is very important and is emerging as a very important serotype with up to 20 to 30% of the population actually develops serotype 3. So we're very pleased that we're now seeing what looks like best-in-class immunogenicity against serotype 3. On the pediatric front, as you mentioned, the study is ongoing, so we hope to provide additional data later this year. But everything we've seen so far suggests to us that we've got improved immunogenicity of PCV25 versus our current vaccine. Just a reminder as well, we do have a 5th generation vaccine, 30+, that's also now in preclinical development that we hope to launch in phase 1 later this year. On ponsegromab, very quickly, we're excited about the data for cancer cachexia, and the cancer cachexia study should start later this year in a phase 3 experience. We stopped the development of the cardiovascular study.
Thank you. And I want also to emphasize that the development strategy on PCV 30+ involves the development of PCV25. So define the strategy, which is development and regulatory, that will allow us to accelerate the 30+ by investing now in 25, which will come earlier, of course, to the market. And I think there was a question also on the penetration or PCV, but right now, both pediatric and adult, we have a very, very high market share. We reported actually 87% market share. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Courtney Green with Bernstein. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking my call today. And thanks for the details on kind of how you're thinking about the R&D organization. Just a clarifier, and perhaps you can help us understand the strategy a little bit more here. It sounds like you're shifting into 4 R&D organizations. I also heard reference, though, to end-to-end areas. So can you talk about whether these are similar or different to how oncology was set up earlier this year? earlier last year? And then additionally, can you talk a little bit about how you're allocating investment across R&D, across those 4 separate engines? How are you making sure that the bar is high in all of those different therapeutic areas and ensuring you've got the right prioritization given the independence of these units?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. So, Chris, start, and then Andrew can chime in.
Yes, so thank you very much for the question. So for oncology, as you stated, since the beginning of 2023, we had an end-to-end organization covering discovery, early stage development, late stage development, as well as medical. And we already had that in vaccines since 2009. And now we build the same structure for I&I and internal medicine. So essentially, all 4 of those will be end-to-end organizations for quicker decision-making and quicker handover between discovery phase 1 and then from early development into late phase development. Andrew, regarding the...
Yeah, Courtney, you hit upon a critical question. So historically, when you look back, there's no shortage of first-in-class breakthrough molecules that we've successfully shepherded through development. However, some of those really have not delivered in terms of financial revenues and therefore to shareholders. And the key issue is really ensuring that we have successful portfolio prioritization, bringing that commercial lens to much earlier during the process and having estimates that are derived in an unbiased way and are dynamic and subject to continued revision. So as in my role as chair of the PMT since I joined Pfizer, partnering with Chris, we've been working through that pipeline, starting with the later stage assets, but then moving earlier to make sure the decisions we make drug by drug, indication by indication, are ones that are going to deliver value for shareholders as well as to patients.
Thank you for the question, Courtney. And I want also to chime in and say that in our the R&D organization that we have right now, I think has very, very, very strong capabilities. And is proven with the number of approvals. But we have 13, like last year, and even same number in 23. No one even had even close to this number. If you see our success rates are at 17% compared to 10, 11 of the industry. Very few, they have these success rates. And in time to the market, we are having approximately 5.6 years when most of the industry is in 7, 8 years after improvements. However, looking back, I don't think that we could have done way better in choosing the right products to focus our R&D capabilities, which is, I think, what now Chris and Andrew, with the commercial assessments, will try to do. The good news is that if it was a question of capabilities to improve our R&D productivity, that would be a multi-year undertaking. When it is a question of refocusing your investments, that's way more quick. And I'm very optimistic that the results will come out very, very quickly. With that, let's go to the next question.
We'll go next to Evan Seigerman with BMO Capital Markets. Please go ahead.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for taking my question and congrats on all the progress. So given RFK Jr.'s approval by the Senate Finance Committee this morning, can you walk me through how you plan on working with him as a likely head of HHS, especially with his views on vaccines and general skepticism of the pharma industry?
Yes. I was also informed that the Senate Committee voted in favor of him, so I think his confirmation is pretty much secure right now. Of course, we will see what the full Senate will do. Look, I mean, we have with the Trump administration, as a pharma industry, in particular, we speak as Pfizer, a very good relations. Personally, myself, I have very long-lasting relationship with the president, but was cemented during the operational warp speed when we developed the vaccine for COVID. And I know that the president is very proud of what he was able to accomplish, and he has made public statements on that. We met with Mr. Kennedy. Actually, the president introduced me to him, and we had dinner, all three together, and we tried to understand his views. I focused more, not on the things that we clearly disagreed, like the vaccines, but on the things that we can agree and we can do things together. And those are things in chronic diseases, in cardiovascular diseases, and more importantly, in cancer. which is something that is very, very high in the mind of the president. And it is also very high in the mind of Mr. Kennedy. I met him a few times also after that. We expect that we will have a collaboration. It's not do I expect that we will agree on everything on vaccines? I don't know, but I think probably, as I hear all the statements that have been done by him and by the administration, he will have a way more tempered view on how to interact in the vaccines. But I don't want to speak about him. I think there are a lot of opportunities that probably outweigh the risks that we have with the radical change that we will see from the Trump administration, actually that we are seeing now with the Trump administration. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Now let's move to the next question.
We'll go next to Kripa Devarakonda with Truist Securities. Please go ahead.
Hey guys, thank you so much for taking my question and congratulations on all the progress. I have a question on your breast cancer franchise. You recently announced a strategy for developing your CDK4 in first-line breast cancer as monotherapy and also in combination with vepdeg, the ER PROTAC. As the landscape evolves, with other CDK4/6 inhibitors, different combinations, how do you see Pfizer's portfolio in breast cancer evolve over the next few years? Do you see this, as the strategy as getting a piece of the broader pie, or are there areas with your CDK4 and with vepdeg where you think you could establish a niche? And also, with the phase 3 data from vepdeg expected any time in first quarter, what needs to happen with these data for it to be considered competitive? Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. We are very fortunate because we've got a lot of optionality now in breast cancer. I'll start with CDK4. We believe this is a best-in-class CDK inhibitor, and what we've seen for compliance and the rate of AEs, specifically treatment-related AEs, as well as discontinuations. We are very optimistic in that CDK4 could not only replace Ibrance, but all CDK4/6 inhibitors earlier line breast cancer, including first line, as well as potentially in the future also in the adjuvant setting. As Albert has mentioned, we are pleased that the first line study is now ongoing. That's CDK4, atirmociclib in combination with letrozole. To your point, we also expect the readout for vepdeg in the second line setting with a de-risk study that includes ESR1 population as well as all-comer population. And that medicine potentially could become a replacement for backbone endocrine treatment. We are planning a study in the first line setting combining vepdeg plus CDK4 in first line ER-positive breast cancer. I also just quickly want to mention KAT6 because KAT6 is a differentiated epigenetic molecule. This is a first in category medicine. You've seen the data, very exciting, very encouraging data in later line disease. And we're accelerating that also into a registration study with an ongoing phase 3 trial in second line plus ER-positive breast cancer. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there a question also for Daniel? No, it was not. Okay, good. Let's go now to the next question, please.
We'll go next with Terrence Flynn with Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much for taking the question. Maybe two for me on the pipeline. On Elrexfio first, just on the commercial side, can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of uptake at the academic versus community centers? Are you seeing any broadening out into the community setting, or is that really going to be contingent on getting some of the earlier line data that you're expecting later this year from the phase 3 trial? And then on danuglipron on the dose optimization study, can you just kind of clarify how much data you're going to share later this quarter? Will we get weight loss data? Will we get tolerability data? How much data will be in the initial press release? Thank you.
Thank you. Amir?
Yeah, we're very excited about the momentum on Elrexfio. We continue to see increase in share and new patient starts quarter over quarter in the class. And the uptick also does include community receptivity and awareness and new account adoption. And obviously, with the whole slew of trials, assuming they're successful to follow, I think there's a lot of momentum behind Elrexfio. And over the course of this year, we expect it to grow rapidly, driven primarily by increased demand in our top 100 accounts, as well as increased adoption in the community setting, which I think positions Elrexfio very, very well for the future as we expand indications into earlier lines of therapy in 26 and beyond.
Thank you. And myself, I was quite impressed with the community oncologist uptake of this product as quickly as it happened in the US. But also we have very good news for Elrexfio in the international market, Alexander.
Yeah, indeed, Elrexfio was commercially launched in already 6 markets in 2024 out of our top 15 markets, so quite fast penetration. And of course, in 2025, we're expecting to get an additional 18 markets, and 4 additional of our top 15 markets will launch this year. But the combination of the expand access plus the performance of the brands where we already have introduced the product gives us great confidence for accelerated growth. And to give you a sense, Japan is the second largest market outside of the US, and we had a significant and very rapid demand in Japan, where Elrexfio was introduced first to market BCMA specific, and we've seen an immediate acceleration of utilization, actually deep into the community in Japan. And where we've launched with other product BCMA specific, like in the UK, in Spain, in Italy, are markets where we have demonstrated that Elrexfio leadership, and we expect to continue this leadership position in 2025. So the combination of increased access and where we already had introduced growth expansions, there are 2 reasons why we believe the product has great potential.
In general, Elrexfio, because we do think that it is a mega blockbuster that will become, you need to understand that already in the first year, we had more than $130 million of sales. And this is in a very niche indication. This is triple refractory, which means patients that they have short duration of treatment and they are really failed after everything else that was tried. As we move to, we have 4 phase 3 studies, right? One could read this year, and that not only triples the population, so we go to bigger population, but also expands significantly the duration of treatment. And that it is true as we go to the next line and to the first line eventually. So we think that in the US and international, this product will become a very big oncology product for Pfizer. And with that, let's Daniel, please, Chris.
Yeah, just what we stated earlier. So in Q1, we expect the PK data. We're on target for that. Remember, this is looking at different formulations and will determine the dose selection for a once-a-day tablet, for once-a-day approach for a potential taking forward into a registration strategy. Although you mentioned weight loss is a secondary endpoint on the study. This is a smaller study, it's an in-unit study, so it may not be that reliable for weight loss from a small number of patients.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Mohit Bansal with Wells Fargo. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you very much for taking my question. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about Prevnar. How are you seeing Prevnar share? I mean, you did talk about the market share here, but in terms of peds versus adults, how are you seeing the market share evolving? Now that also Vaxneuvance has an expansion in next year, there is also a lower adult eligibility in terms of age. So can you talk a little bit about these dynamics and how do you see market evolving here?
All right, let's start with international and we go to the US for a change.
Okay, all right. So on Prevnar, as you know, in international, 2/3 of the business comes from the pediatric indication. And this like kind of macro view with our Prevnar pneumococcal vaccine, we have maintained exclusivity in an IP in about 140 markets around the world. So that gives you the sense of the breadth of our pneumococcal vaccine. And as we move over the times, our intention is, of course, to replace our Prevnar 13 to our Prevnar 20. So now, of course, there are, now if we go into the details, in emerging market, we have a very large cohort of babies every year, so around 76 million new baby. And of course, alongside our great collaboration with the Gavi organization, we have our commercial organizations where we have demonstrated this year a double-digit growth of our Prevnar franchise. So a great execution in emerging market. Now, in the developed markets, following the EMA and the Japan approval, remember in March only of 2024, we've started to gain VTC approval and funding. And where we start to see that, we see that we are recapturing very quickly some of the business that went to competition. So give you an example. In Japan, Prevnar 20, as I said, was approved in March. We got the VTC recommendation in October, and our market share in first dose went from 3% in September to 86% in December. So we see that when the Prevnar 20 gets approved, we really have an opportunity to regain that business. And on the adult side, here again, we've seen a very strong growth in 2024 that we continue to expect significant growth just because we are expanding access in more mature markets with our Prevnar 20 adults.
And Amir, in the US?
In the US, let me start with the adult market. We have right now a very strong position in the adult market. Now, we are going to face competitive pressure over the course of 2025 from Capvaxive, but we are confident that we will continue to maintain meaningful market share. A lot of that has to do with our commercial execution, as well as the fact that many accounts, particularly non-retail accounts, prefer to stock a single vaccine. So we'll see that evolve over the course of the year. And while we don't think that there's much catch-up opportunity in the 65 plus, we also think there is growth opportunity in the 50 to 64 age group that brings about 30 million adults into the eligible population. So those will be the dynamics in adult. Now in peds, there again, we have very significant market share, and on the theme of improved market share across all of our vaccines, we saw a 12 percentage point improvement from August 23 to December 24 in our pediatric market share. And here we expect this to be a much more stable market. We plan to retain that kind of leadership share, and we expect volumes to be more stable here.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question.
We'll go next to Dave Reisinger with the Leerink Partners. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks very much, and thanks for all the updates. So my question is just going back to RFK Jr. So assuming he is confirmed as HHS Secretary, and given his history of suing manufacturers and his commentary on lawsuits in the hearings last week, could you just help us understand his ability as HHS Secretary to remove U.S. vaccine liability protections that manufacturers currently benefit from and allow manufacturers the freedom to develop and sell vaccines that save lives? Thank you.
Yeah, look, I don't want to comment because these are legal issues, but I believe that the liability is through Senate, through Congress approval. So I don't think anyone can change that without, let's say, Senate approval. I know that creates a turbulence into the market today, and with RFK, it was almost certain that he would get confirmed. And we have engaged with him early enough so that we can mitigate all the issues. If he does the things that he has said in the past, because during the hearings, he, of course, clearly he tempered his statements on vaccines. But if he tries to do some of the things that he said in the past, I think that he won't find in front of him the industry. He will find in front of him the total medical community and the total scientific community and payers that they don't want to see a reduction in vaccinations because that's a very cost-effective way of controlling healthcare costs. And more than important, this is not what the Trump administration would like to see, another health crisis. So I would say that I feel cautiously optimistic that they will be very, very prudent with everything they try to do. Let's go to the next question.
We'll go next to Trung Huynh with UBS. Please go ahead.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the questions. Just two from me. So firstly, going back to Abrizo, I think Amir noted potential policy changes in RSV. So do you have any insight if there's going to be a discussion from ACIP on revaccination or cohort expansion this year? I guess that could be a positive for your guide. And then two, on PADCEV's potential registrational muscle-invasive bladder cancer trial, in general, I think cystectomy is used to cure patients in this setting. So just wondering how you're going to position this and how quick could you penetrate this population if approved? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Very quickly, Amir, on the Abrizo, and then we go.
Yeah, what I described during were the catalysts that could result in market expansion for Abrizo. Obviously, it's too early and not our place to comment on what exactly ACIP's going to take on it when.
Thank you. And Chris on PADCEV.
Thank you for the question. Reminder that this is event-driven studies, so we hope by the end of this year, but if the event doesn't happen, we'll move a little bit on. Muscle invasive, about 28,000 population in the US alone, so it could more than double, as we mentioned, triple the population currently eligible. Currently, there's no standard of care treatment other than surgery, cystectomy, for patients considered cisplatin ineligible. So there's two studies, one for cisplatin eligible and one for cisplatin ineligible. For the cisplatin eligible, the currently is dominated by neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So there's a real need for both adjuvant and neoadjuvant treatment and to replace chemotherapy in the setting of cisplatin eligible disease. And of course, for cisplatin ineligible disease, it will completely change the future treatment paradigm. So we're very excited if these studies are positive and what we've seen. We've got confidence in these data from earlier studies. So yeah.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Akash Tewari with Jefferies. Please go ahead.
Hey, thanks so much. Just on QD danuglipron, it looks like you're using a bilayer immediate release in matrix technology here, but you don't actually test your bilayer formulation until the second half of your weight loss trial. Is that what your team's waiting on before you make a formal update, or is it perhaps the Lilly orforglipron data that's also going to factor into this decision? Thank you.
I don't think we have disclosed the technology. I know that there were speculations into the marketplace, but we haven't disclosed the technology, so I'm not sure we can say much. But Chris, you want to add anything?
No, I don't think we need to add right now. Yeah.
Next, go to the next question.
We'll go next to Chris Shibutani with Goldman Sachs. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Quick one on the pipeline and another on business development strategy. On the pipeline, I noticed in phase 2 you've advanced the GIP antagonist. Is that something that you'll be continuing to share data on, particularly as a monotherapy? And do you have any efforts ongoing to do a combination? In terms of business development strategy, I think the vocabulary you used included a capacity of perhaps in the $10 to $15 billion zip code. And I'm curious to know what you are solving for. And I ask this in part because historically there had been a view of using cash to acquire $25 billion in revenue by the end of the decade. But now when we think about where we are in this decade and what you could be solving for structurally, there seem to be approaches sourcing assets from China, for instance. Many of your competitors are doing this. Are you solving for near-term revenues, or are you looking to use other methods, including perhaps partnerships over M&A? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, let me start a little bit on the BD, and also Andrew can chime in. We had very clear that so far we have acquired $20 billion of 2030 revenues. We are very confident that we will hit this number. Very confident. So that's so far so good on that, right? Looking forward, of course, we are looking at more strategic opportunities right now, which will enhance pipeline in areas that we would like to play rather than near-term revenues on BD. I would ask Andrew to comment, and then if you can speak, Chris, about the GIP antagonist.
Sure. So, hi, Chris, nice to hear your voice. So on the BD side, Albert said the key word, which is strategic. So everything we do will be viewed through a strategic lens of building around our core competencies or building competencies in areas that maybe we have not been in previously, if that's what we decide to do. On your point regarding China, it has not escaped our attention. Of course, the innovation from China across multiple therapeutic areas, and indeed that was most evident with oncology some years ago, but now it's expanding to most therapeutic areas. They're mostly fast followers, but I expect that will change as well. It's an area that we are very, very active in. We continue to have very fruitful discussions, and let's just see where we go. So I'll hand it to Chris.
We have a very strong footprint in China, and that includes not only commercial, but we have very strong R&D footprint that they are looking at Chinese innovation because they're progressing very fast and to identify opportunities. Chris.
On the GIPR antagonist, this is potentially a first-in-class oral small molecule GIPR antagonist. It's currently in an ongoing phase 2 placebo-controlled study evaluating the GIPR antagonist in adults with obesity on the background of GLP-1 receptor agonists. If the data from the phase 2 study are positive, we may potentially be able to develop also fixed dose combinations, including with GLP-1, including potentially danuglipron in the future.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We'll go next to Alex Hammond with Wolfe Research. Please go ahead.
Thanks for squeezing me in. On Vyndaqel, with new competitors on the market and on the way, can you walk us through how we should think about the near-term commercial dynamics? Where could we see the largest share impact, newly prescribed patients or switches? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Amir?
Yeah, Vynda obviously had very significant momentum in 24. You saw the growth rates, and that was due in large part to the commercial efforts and the attention and investment we put behind it. We saw improvement in diagnosis rate as well as new patient starts, and we also did benefit from what was a one-time bolus of annual enrollment patients in the first quarter of 24 due to favorable affordability. So as we look into 25, there's both headwinds and tailwinds, and we're confident in the growth of Vynda, obviously at a different rate than it grew in 24. We do see increased diagnosis education, growth in the prescriber base, and there will continue to be favorable affordability conditions. But we do expect that there will be some headwinds. Obviously, you referred to 2 new market entrants that will have some impact that remains to be seen both on switching patients as well as new patient starts. I think it's also important to remember that there will be impact of IRA on Vynda and the effect that it has on the calendarization of our GTN, with more of the GTN impact coming earlier in the year as we reach the catastrophic phase. Now, with all of that said, I think we remain really confident and excited. With Vynda, we've got a robust clinical profile that has data both from the clinical trial and the long-term extension. We've got 5-year real-world data on VOWS. We've got strong access, and we are confident in our position as the standard of care.
And let's move to the last question now.
Our last question comes from Tim Anderson with Bank of America. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question on just obesity strategy. So to me, late entrant companies with one lead asset might struggle unless they have real clinical differentiation. It could be in a better position if they have a collection of assets. There's naturally turnkey solutions out there in terms of companies that any larger company could either partner with or acquire outright. How is Pfizer looking at its BD efforts in this regard, either partnership or acquisition that could bring you one or more assets that aren't far away from being in phase 3?
Andrew?
Yeah, hi, Tim. So I agree with your assertion that obesity is heterogeneous and likely require a set of tools encompassing both different modalities and different delivery devices in order to manage what is a lifelong condition. These assets do exist. Some are scattered, some have portfolios, but you could imagine that, of course, we are looking at all the opportunities and trying to understand what delivers the most value to patients and obviously to Pfizer shareholders.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes our call. Thank you all for your interest